So Scott, I mean, why are existing WAN technologies described as the last IT wilderness?
I don't want to give away my age, but when I became a networking engineer, the way we configured an edge router and the way we build an MPLS network is exactly the same way we do it today. And those things just haven't changed, which is, in an industry that moves so quickly, that's really quite amazing. And it's become a disabler for enterprises and businesses. It's become incredibly expensive, not just in the infrastructure you need to run, but the managed services that Anne talked about that you need to do moves, adds and changes that sit around that. And we need to change that. If we want to keep pace with the industry and be able to enable the applications that digital is trying to drive, we fundamentally need to change the way we manage networks. That's the real driver behind that, both for us as service providers and for enterprise customers in the way they control their environment.
So Manoj, to continue on that theme, the legacy WAN technologies really aren't up to task. And when we look at AR, augmented reality and artificial intelligence and the IoT, all those connected devices, so how will they be able to cope, and what are really the shortcomings, and what's the fix in terms of moving to an SDN-enabled automated network?
I see it as an and, not an or, because if you look at traditional technologies like IP MPLS technologies, they have strong benefits in terms of giving a certain quality of service, a certain sort of availability, and we want to build on that. If you look at some of the newer services like SD-WAN and additional services we're delivering, like AR, VR, and all that stuff, you want to build on those capabilities and then add to it. So it's not the tyranny of the or, it's a little bit of an and, right? So, and in the and journey, it's all about agility of services. It's not those fixed pinned way of delivering things anymore. It's how can you deliver agile services in a way we can operationally simplify the whole aspect of it, right? So it's in many ways we're going from the connectivity world, like Scott was saying, where things were done in the CLI and all that stuff, to more of a automated world where things are going to be automatically done, in many of these things. And if you deliver services in agile fashion, that's what the users want. So I think that's where the world is going.
And if it's really disruptive if you think about for large incumbents that provide more, what we now I guess are today calling traditional networking. This is quite disruptive from in terms of traditional revenue streams. That will really change, because when you move to this technology, it is a lot more efficient, and there is real cost savings for our customers. So it's exciting, really for challengers in the marketplace to really go in and say, it really opens up the market, which is interesting.
To put it simply as an example, right? In the old world, it was about a circuit which was, so call it 10 meg circuit or 100 meg circuit. In the new world, it's about, it doesn't matter what you want. Do you want 10 meg or 10 gig? We're going to give you this flexible bandwidth on demand. That's the difference.
I think there's a big gotcha for enterprise customers to look out for, and that's the openness of the platform that you put in place. Yeah. If you think through the example I gave you and the automation, very shortly from now, the network will actually just be controlled by the application. If your video service needs more bandwidth or needs to route traffic, it will do it automatically. If your Salesforce.com implementation needs more capability for a new service, it'll just call that service from the network. The openness of the architecture you put in place is critically important. You need flexibility in the VNFs you're going to use, openness of the APIs and the security model that sits on top of that. And I think enterprise customers need to be careful not to go down a proprietary road that could lock them into just one architecture and one strategy that would preclude them from using cloud-native technology. So getting that right, I think, is a big step, and that's a big change in networking.
It does open things up, do you agree?
Totally.
It just opens the market up much more than it is today.
Yep, fundamentally changes who is important in the control of your network.
Yeah.
And agility comes from programmability, and that's what keeps things open. So this is where the world is going.
We get to the point where we have open standards. And so you get flexibility not just in the network features that we talked about, but also in the hardware. It's really important to have that ecosystem together.
Yeah, I agree with those points entirely, but I do feel there is a lot of work to be done in the white box universal CPE area, where you can take that cheap Intel chip and spin up VNFs on top of that. So the vendors really need to work together and cooperate.
I think that's right. Virtualization as a whole. We've virtualized some of the most important core elements of our network. Our voice traffic on 4G is on fully virtualized infrastructure. And it's taken us 3 years to get the capacity, performance that we want, the flexibility in the operating model. When something fails, is it the hardware manufacturer? Is it the virtualization layer? Is it the software on top of that? Those have been big shifts for us in our operating model. And as an industry, we're early in that phase. I think the next 3, 4, 5 years, you'll see those models be more well developed and easier for enterprises to consume. But that's not a reason not to go down the path of SD-WAN. You need to learn those things yourself anyway, so you might as well start that journey.
From a customer point of view, it needs to be seamless. It doesn't matter whether it's a virtual function or a physical function or a combination. It needs to be seamless, and we need to enable our customers to have that experience.
And often part of that could be the commercial agreement, right? So if you're spinning up a VNF, but you just want to try it for a short while, or you want to try it for 10 sites for 12 months, but then turn it off again. So you need to also have that commercial flexibility from the independent software vendors. But I agree there's a momentum behind that. As those become more widely deployed, ISVs will follow, providing it's based on open,
I think
on open platforms.
But across for all of us, and for the ecosystem that supports networking, just commercial models are going to change. It really, so that kind of steady stream that you see, you know, that it's pretty, you know, if you look at revenue lines, they tend to be pretty static, right? Because people do long contracts. That all gets changed on its head. Yeah. It really does.
It does. I mean, one of the things that I'm super excited about is the development of network features. Because traditionally, if you wanted to launch a network feature and you're a brand new company, you had to have a supply chain, you had to be able to find the hardware, you had to do the software. Now, I expect there to be an explosion in the number of people that are developing network features, because the barriers to entry are tiny. Because the ability to be able to deploy it over a network via a service provider into a customer is easy. And that will create a completely different commercial paradigm.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I think we'll see also bring your own VNF. So let there be a grand menu of VNFs available to the customer, but they can also come and say, well, actually, we'd like to use this one, that it's ours. Can we use it, please?
Yeah.
How do customers make that transition from A to B? So they're on the legacy platform and they want to move to a digital SD-WAN capability.
What we've been doing over the last few months is spending a lot of time with companies to say, you know, just are really understanding the current topology. And it's you know, a lot of organizations sometimes, because the network is just built up like over years, don't actually understand their own topology. So the first is, you know, we have a responsibility to work with them to say, this is what you have today. And then really just to map out how they move to this new technology. And it's not as complex as people think, actually, because you can layer it on top of the existing infrastructure, for want of a better word, and then move, you know, in a period of months to it. So I think it takes particularly if you're a mid-sized organization, so kind of repeating what we said before, if you're high tech, then they just have lots of resources, you know, people that understand this. But actually, it is quite a dramatic change if you know, have had a network that's been running, you have a small IT team, and therefore our job, right, is really to help customers just move seamlessly over. And we've been taking our time to do that and spending time with them, because, you know, people just won't move overnight, right? It takes time, and you know, some will transition quickly, others it'll be over a 12-month period.
We've seen a fundamental change in the win rates of customers who weren't originally ours. Yeah. And that's because the risk has been removed from the CIO. You know, for most CIOs, it's like changing the tiles on the roof. They don't really get a lot of value. The 10% worth of saving they get from running an RFP is not enough for the risk that might be introduced by changing the networks out. So having the ability to be able to run over an existing underlay network is really attractive, but also having an architecture that allows the old world and the new world to speak with one another is also critical. And I'd really recommend anybody thinking about this to make sure they look quite carefully at who they choose, to make sure that you have that parity, you have the ability to run an old network and a new network on what might be a fairly protracted migration cycle. I
guess if you take from a Vodafone perspective, just our global leadership position in IoT, the fact that we're globally a really large fixed player, one of the largest mobile players, the experience we have of the merging of those networks is really powerful for our customers. And the fact that we can help them on the journey, because IoT is now no longer this separate business case that customers kind of go, God, we think it's really good, but how could it help our business? It's mainstream, right? So it's the solutions we sell every single day to our customers. And therefore, I think just the heritage that we have across all those platforms is really powerful. And I think customers appreciate the advice that we can give and kind of moving onto the new technologies.
And if you look at some of the customers in UK, for instance, right? If you look at the large enterprises, if you look at Barclays, it has office and retail location. If you look at a large enterprise like BP, it has office, retail, and probably even industrial locations. So, Vodafone, when it builds services for large customers like this, you need to look at not just what's today on your IP MPLS service, but also what about industrial automation in the future? So how can you go from today to tomorrow, but it's not one or the other. It's a complementary technology, what's today and what's tomorrow.
And it's cross industries. Often you find with new technologies, finance might go first or professional services. This is just, we're not seeing any particular vertical go ahead of another vertical, to be honest. It's just literally across all our customers, yeah.
There are several common themes across those verticals. For example, in supply chain, we've seen from our own research that the accuracy of supply chain is impacted tremendously by agility in the network. And on services, you can have, it's a very human, hour billable type of concept where having an agile platform underneath that can enable those customers to differentiate in their own right. Because I think the customers, enterprises need to amaze their customers in order to succeed versus their competitors, and to do that they have to have a digital platform in place today and not get left behind. There's also an opportunity, I think, for greenfields. So it depends on, or just reinventing a business. There are some examples of digital platforms that are entirely new businesses created, and the underlying network is SD-WAN from the outset, just to get that competitive advantage.
I think it depends a little on how that company is adopting digital across their own organization. Some people do it in small startup silos in one particular area, and they tend to adopt SDN just in that one area. Other people, and you mentioned some of the banks, have done an amazing job of rebuilding their entire customer experience model using digital, and therefore SDN has a much broader appeal to their whole organization. They tend to adopt at a much broader rate. So it really depends a little bit on the digital strategy of the organization and how quickly they're trying to move to agile and cloud native technologies, and SDN follows that path.